Hopefully you can see that. Actually, this presentation isn't really the presentation I wanted to give, but it's kind of a bunch of kind of useful bits of information and things that we learned during this COVID-19 period. What I wanted to talk about was kind of more about the kind of bigger impact of what's happening. And maybe we'll do that. It was quite hard to do that presentation in the time given, and also I wanted to make it a bit more interactive anyway. So in BT, we have a code name called Houston. It's when we have something very big happen. It's like a disaster recovery plan. You know, if we lose a major network element or something goes wrong and we start to get lots of people calling us, and basically kind of Houston, it comes from the Apollo XIII, Houston, we've got a problem. And basically the ethos of it is, as Gene Kranz said when this happened, you know, the first thing about a disaster recovery plan is usually the disaster recovery plan goes out the window the minute that you have something happen. And sure, there are some key things that you need to do and key things that you need to think about, but ultimately, you know, the plan kind of goes out the window. And for most of us, in big telco and many other organizations, we have like a disaster recovery location where everybody moves to it. So the first thing is our disaster recovery locations. Well, we can't really use them because they're not really that usable in the kind of pandemic situation. And we do have a pandemic response program which kicked in parallel to what we were doing on the network. And then really what I want to talk in a bit of depth is what do we do for our people, network, customers, and then you know, some security challenges that came throughout this. If I think about our people first, so we run about 500 shops across the UK, and clearly, you know, one of the first things that was announced was shops would be closing. So we closed all of our shops initially, and actually we repurposed them into extra support for call centers for things like, you know, we had a lot of people trying to say, I'm trying to set up Zoom, or I'm trying to do this, or I'm trying to do this, and we would direct some of those calls into our call centers. We closed all of our offices, including we have a couple of massive offices in across the world. In India, we have a huge staff both in our own BT location, but also we leverage a lot of the Indian contract organizations where we've probably got something like 10,000 people in India alone. And then we were actually already in progress to deploy Teams, and there was one thing kind of holding back. We used it in technology, which is the area of BT I work in. We're planning on rolling it out, but we kind of rolled out, and we did see a couple of wobbles at that point in time with how stable Teams was, I think, as Microsoft were turning up the tap on being able to cope with the volume of users. We were able to turn up our VPN to cope with 80,000 unique VPN users. So that's across BT, everything from people in vans in our field team or in OpenReach to people on the other side of the planet who need access to our services. Those using working at home from our network operations center, which I'll come on to in a minute. We also made it really clear to our staff, and this is something that I felt quite strongly about. Before this event, there was a couple of articles about how the network's going to fall apart. And I'll be honest with you, if there was a way to wind me up, it was those articles. And I kind of became very focused that this wouldn't be the network's falling apart, that this would be our greatest hour, not just for us at BT, but for our whole industry, where quite often the value of what we do is not always apparent. We saw over 500% use of video and video calls, and then in our operations centers, we migrated the NOCs to work from home in the second week of lockdown. We adjusted shifts, so if you think about it, most of us work from home. Life is good. We just get up at 8, do a bit of work, chill out at 6. we have a lot of 24/7 requirements where if you're working from home and you've got kids and you've got to sleep, how do you actually cope with that situation? And unfortunately for us, we're able to work for the most part such that people who were able to work from home, through the night and then sleep during the day, were able to. So some people who were on days that didn't have a family or were able to cope with that better, we swapped some things around. Clearly that becomes more challenging the longer this goes on, and it's something, one of the things we really want to reopen is some of our network operations sites. Call centers, initially we put social distancing in, which is quite challenging. We've got about 20 big call centers across UK and Ireland. We also have a couple outside of the UK for our global business. We gave free meals, and then as it became clear that this was going to go on for probably longer than a few weeks, we started to migrate most of them back to work from home also. The big challenge with that is we run 999 for the entire country, and it's quite a hard, the system it uses is quite a hard thing to make work from home. So that's probably one exception, but we have social distancing, and we did things like, we've got cleaners coming in much more often. We've got gloves and PPE for those who want it, both in our call centers, but also in our field. And we're able to step up to really making that as comfortable an environment as we can, given that we needed people to come into the office. And then the field forces, really challenging situation for them. So my colleagues in OpenReach immediately kind of stopped going on to premise. Trying to go into someone's house was quite a risky thing to do. They engaged MBORC, Matters Beyond Our Reasonable Control, which kind of puts in some special procedures and methods of coping with this situation, such that we're able to focus on keeping the network run. And then we had kind of we kind of categorize certain jobs, service impact and high priority, complete if you can, or let's just not do that because the risk's high. And actually that categorization changes and adapts as we went through different phases of this. So we envisaged 4 phases of this crisis. We're kind of in what we would call phase 3, where everyone's kind of locked down at home, but we actually have phase 4, where actually this gets so bad that the government puts much more control in. Actually, if you're an engineer right now, you can kind of drive your van wherever you like, but we envisaged that could take one step forward, where actually you might not be able to do that. So how do we cope with that, and how do we know where folks are? So in all of those phases, we've got different ways of connecting to our teams, mandatory check-ins to make sure that people are checked in, because in a lot of places we've gone to single worker working, again within the categories of work type. So we haven't got anyone climbing ladders on their own, for example, but we do have people in exchanges changing faulty cards, for example. We also, so we moved about 8,000 call center agents. We've given our staff PPE where it's required. And again, that's got a difficult balancing act, because clearly we want all the PPE to go to the health workers. So we didn't want to join this kind of challenge on where there's a really significant global shortage. We don't really want to exacerbate that, but also we need to realize that actually if there's no network, this crisis could get a hell of a lot worse. And then we kind of shifted into a mode of mental well-being. So it's one of the things I really learned out of this is that in my head, I had this mental model of how different people in my team and who I work with would cope with this. I think for the most part, my mental model was completely wrong. There are some people in my team that are coping with this really well that I would never have said that they would be able to. There are some that aren't. And coming out of this, it's something I want to study and understand more about. But clearly, people's own individual situation with their families, with their friends, is something that kind of works on the mind of people. You've got kids at home, and it's really quite challenging to really get that right. And I'll be honest with you, I'm probably rubbish at mental well-being, because in my head it's kind of, you know, shrug it off, and those people with more mental health challenging issues is always difficult. I'm going to keep moving on because I'm going to run out of time.
Yeah, please, Neil. We're at the 10-minute mark now.
Oh, okay. So let me. I've got to slide 2. So hence why I didn't think I'd get this done. So let me just talk about this slide then. We have this was kind of the traffic the first week of lockdown. So you can see 2303, the Prime Minister's TV address. And you know, a bit of a blip in traffic. This is our fixed network. You can also see the end of that week, the clap for carers and how that you know, affected traffic. Actually, we were never really worried about the traffic, more or less. We were concerned maybe about some big video game downloads, but actually normal traffic. We had some of you might remember back in 2018, there was a big snow event in the UK. A lot of people were stuck at home, including schools, for a couple of days. We went back on our network data platform. We went back to that day, took a look at what happened. Actually, the big difference was we had about 10 terabits a second was our peak, as opposed to 17 and a half. So we really were able to get to a position where we were super comfortable. But our big worry was that Call of Duty and Fortnite do a big update at the same time during the day or during the evening, where that might cause us some difficulties or interrupt those that are trying to do homeworking. Actually, Ofcom and DCMS, government, were very supportive in trying to help that. So I'm going to probably skip to this slide just to end with. So basically, one of the key things that we've seen, one of the things that's worried us the most is, whilst we've all been trying to keep the country running, there's a bunch of nefarious people trying to make sure that it falls apart. We've seen a massive increase in the number of DDoS. We've seen a lot of what you might call state-sponsored activity across the security environment. We've got quite a good platform that automates this. We see broadband customers, I mean, I find this ridiculous, where they're playing video games, DDoSing each other on demand. And we need to do more to stop that behavior, because it's totally unacceptable. But one thing is that's definitely out there is, and it's something that continually worries me when you've got lots of people working from home, there are nefarious people out there that want to intercept what we do and make it go bad, and everybody should be thinking about that. And just to kind of end on that point, we saw this kind of madness of 5G and 5G, you know, being used as a weapon of transmitting this disease. I mean, quite frankly, utter rubbish. First of all, a big thanks to Ofcom, who shut down a lot of some of the crazier broadcasts, but also to Facebook, Google, and the other social media networks who were also quite on top of this. I'm normally someone that would be screaming out for freedom of speech, no matter how crazy you are. But in this world where we've got people disconnecting folks, and many of you on the call on the conference have experienced this firsthand, it's very frustrating. Our engineers were abused, both verbally and physically, and really something that's not acceptable in any standard. And given that I'm out of time, Keith, I will hand back to you.
Okay, thank you, Neil, and for respecting the time constraints that we're under. Just as a comment, all of the slide decks from our speakers have been uploaded to our Indico platform. So if there's slides that go whizzed through that you want to look at in more detail, they are available. Anyway, we have one question for Neil already. Welcome any other questions. Please post them in the Zoom Q&A area.
So this is a question from Sam Mitchell. First of all, congratulations on achieving what you have under the current circumstances. I've been working with Openreach quite a lot recently and haven't felt any negative impact. Secondly, what are your plans to combat the abuse that your field staff are getting in relation to the 5G falls?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one. We've seen, first of all, so Sam, really thanks for the feedback. I'll pass that on to the Openreach team. I mean, they've really excel themselves. And actually, one of the things I wanted to add, but we surveyed our people, and clearly those all working from home are very happy, very content. Those in the field or in call centres, not, they're much more worried. And clearly we've got a field force of about 25,000 engineers out there in their vans, and we're trying to do upgrade. We're trying to do as much as we can without going into premise. So upgrades. We've seen a lot of people move from ADSL to VDSL, and where people can move from VDSL to FTTP or GFast. We're seeing a lot of that, and when we can do that, and we're trying. In terms of 5G, I mean, we've got in BT we have this thing called TARG, which is a process where we run around the security incident. We're engaged with government, police, other network operators, which actually we've all really come together on this to work quite closely. MBNL, CTIL, Voda, O2, and 3 as well. We're trying to try and take the wind out of the sail of the mad stories, which is quite hard because these people, the people that kind of follow this don't really follow science. So it's really hard to convince them otherwise. But we have, there have been some arrests. I don't think there's been any prosecutions. And we have given the team some guidelines around approaching sites. So, for example, we heard, I don't think this was a BT site, but it was something I heard where, folks had stuck razor blades so that if you went to open the cabinet, you were probably going to slice your hand. So we've given the team some procedures to kind of check for things and look for things such that, we don't injure anybody. And the golden rule, if you don't feel safe, walk away or phone the police. Just don't take any chances is the key message I think I would give to everybody. And it's not just BT staff and OpenReach staff that have seen this. I saw a video of a couple of guys doing fibre for community fibre where they were given the most horrendous abuse from a lady, and then it was like crowd madness. So I know it's affecting many of you out there, and I think we're past the worst of it. So hopefully, we'll continue with working with the authorities to tackle it. Ofcom and DCMS. When I actually raised this to DCMS, and then the following night it was mentioned in the government briefing, and we really appreciate their support.
Do we have any further questions for Neil?
Everyone's dealing with Equinix, which is burning down apparently. Hopefully not, but ME1 has a fire alarm for those of you that weren't aware of it. Everyone's thinking, where's ME1? Anyway, if you have any questions or anything you want to understand, feel free to contact me offline. And if you need anything from BT, we can help. Also, feel free to contact me. Many of you have. Sometimes it's not so easy to get a hold of us, but if you're struggling, let me know and I'll help out. Thank you. Thanks. And also, we probably won't get a chance to do this. A huge shout out to the whole UKNOF team for putting this together. Very, very hard, but they've done a great job, and I'd like to thank the team for doing it. Much appreciated.
Okay, thank you, Neil. Yeah, we just have one more comment in the Q&A. As a comment, we don't take anonymous questions at UKNOF. And the comment was from Alan Goodman, which is, thanks, Neil. Your work has had a huge impact in making my life easy the past week.
Thank you.